Hi, my name is Bex and welcome to Getting Emotional. Every week on this podcast, I'll be discovering a brand new emotion. Or rather, I'll tell you about an emotion you may well have felt, but had no idea there was a name for. This week, it's Mono no Aware. There's a section on your Facebook profile where you can change your favourite quotes, or is it quotations? I'm never too sure. I doubt many people actually use or even update the section anymore. It's kind of, I think, a hangover from the beginnings of Facebook about 15 years ago. And when I joined the book, as no one calls it, I agonised over what quotes should be put in there. I ended up with settling on a lyric from the Stone Roses, a line from Father Ted, and this from Jonathan Coe's book, The Rain Before It Falls. Alright, I'll try not to sound too pretentious as I'm reading this to you, but no promises. Here we go. There is nothing one can say, I suppose, about happiness that has no flaws, no blemishes, and no fault lines. None, that is, except the certain knowledge that it will have to come to an end. Now, that is basically a long-winded way of me, 1, showing you how cool I was 15 years ago, pretty good quote, am I right? And 2, explaining the Japanese emotion of mono no aware. It translates into the pathos of things, or an empathy towards things, or, my personal favourite and least useful translation, the arness of things. Now, I am aware they are not particularly helpful as descriptions, so I will do my own for you. I mean, it's literally what this podcast is about, I suppose. It's really a bittersweet feeling, seeing wonderful things happen in life, but kind of also knowing that none of it is permanent. You become both sad and also appreciative of the passing stages of life. It's the kind of feeling you might have when you're looking out of the window, seeing the trees change as the seasons progress, marvelling at how beautiful it is, but also being quite sadly reminded that time is marching on. Those green leaves will soon be falling from the trees, and then they'll be blown away, and then they'll become compost, and oh, you know what, it's got very, very circle of life in here, hasn't it? Sorry about that, I'm just a big Lion King fan. Having said that, referencing the changing of the seasons is quite a good example, if I do say so myself, because mono no aware is mostly referred to in Japanese culture when explaining the national fascination with their cherry blossom trees. They blossom every year and they are incredibly valued. But that's not necessarily because they're the most beautiful trees around, it's more because the blossoms only last a week or two. It's their transience that's so beguiling. Side note, the sentence, "it's their transience that's so beguiling," is the most impressive thing I've ever written or said. With all of this in mind, I decided to find out a little bit more from somebody who'd actually grown up in the Japanese culture and knew this phrase much better than I did.
My name is Sonoko, and I am living in Tokyo. And currently, I am a freelance interpreter, working mainly in the theatre industry. And when I'm not interpreting, I'm a silversmith.
Brilliant stuff. So, now first of all, I have to ask you, how do I pronounce this properly? How do I pronounce this emotion properly?
Mono no aware.
Because I was
the proper pronunciation.
Yeah, I was really anglicising it and calling it mono no aware, which is very, very British.
Yes, it's mono no aware.
And it sounds much more beautiful in your language, Sonoko. So can you tell me a little bit about this emotion?
Yes, I think it does best describe Japanese sentiment, but it's actually a quite old phrase, and it goes back to Heian period with literature. That's where it comes from.
So the emotion itself is, I guess, it's kind of about happiness and sadness. Can you explain it a little bit for us?
Yes, it's finding sort of pleasure and beauty in something that has a very short life. The most obvious example, I think, would be cherry blossoms, because they bloom in the springtime and they have a very short life. And because it doesn't last forever, I think Japanese find beauty in its sort of delicate and frail, fragile things.
It is such a beautiful emotion, and it's the kind of thing that I heard and I was like, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense. Is it something that you've did you just know? Because I asked you about it and you just seemed to, you'd heard this emotion before. Is it something that's kind of in the culture already?
Yes, it's very much in the culture, and I think it's really in the blood of the Japanese. And I think it's because we've got very distinct seasons. So, spring you have cherry blossoms, like I've just explained, and then you have a very short rain season for about a month, and then, sizzling summer, which is very humid, and then suddenly you have a quite dry autumn, and then winter we have snow and it's very, very dry. So we have this very distinct seasons. So all the plants, animals, food, everything is quite seasonal. So I think we sort of find beauty and pleasure in sort of short-lived things.
Sonoko also told me something that I didn't know about Japanese weather forecasts.
Everyone is so concerned about when is the cherry blossom is going to bloom. And even, the weather forecast on telly, they would be saying every day, it's not yet here. And because our country is very vertical, from down south, it's quite tropical weather. And then all the way up the north, you have, heavy snow and very thick snow. So because our country is really long vertically, so it starts down south and then it gradually works upwards towards the northern part of Japan. And they would actually do that on weather forecast every day, and everybody's focusing and really anticipating and getting really excited about cherry blossoms. And they really appreciate and celebrate this flower in full bloom, and it only lasts for about a week and then it's gone, and we're like, bittersweet, and it was beautiful, and we look forward to it, next year. It's quite funny how obsessed we are with cherry blossoms, I think.
Do you think you felt something like this before about Japanese seasons and weather? Have you felt this emotion?
I think so. For example, my favorite fireworks. In Japan, fireworks are very popular, especially in the summertime. And when you say fireworks, you imagine this, huge, magnificent fireworks in the sky. But there's this handcrafted Japanese traditional firework that's made of Japanese washi, Japanese paper. And it's just a twisted piece of paper with tiny bit of powder, firework powder at the very end. And you light it and you hold it in your hand, dangle it straight down, and it gives out little sparkles, and at the very tip of it, a molten ball forms, and then after a while, it sort of dies off. And it's very short, but very, very delicate and fragile and beautiful. And that's my favorite firework, but I think for a lot of people in Japan, they love that firework as well. It's called Senko Hanabi, and it's very, very beautiful. So I suppose rather than very, very, magnificent, huge firework that, lasts for 30 minutes in the sky, you sort of like this little dainty firework that you enjoy for, less than a minute, holding, handheld. Maybe that's one of Mono no Aware too, I think.
What a beaut story. Thank you so much to Sonoko for sharing that with us, and also for teaching me how to actually correctly pronounce the emotion I'm doing a podcast about. So the thing is, I live miles and miles away from any cherry blossom trees. The nearest tree to me right now is a houseplant that is mostly dead because I forgot to water it. But even without Monty Don-esque affinity for plants, I still recognise this emotion. It's something I've definitely felt, but elsewhere, in a non-garden centre setting. And look, I'm not saying I'm some kind of scholarly genius, but the 18th century Japanese scholar Muturi Norinaga agreed, and argued that Mono no Aware was more than a feeling. It's almost a type of knowledge. It's also such a powerful idea that it has inspired art, often based on the cherry trees I mentioned earlier, and poetry, philosophy, manga, films, even literature. My personal favourite is Ken Liu's Hugo Award-winning short sci-fi story. It's called Mono no Aware, and it's about the survivors of planet Earth looking for a new home. So even though this emotion is massively linked into nature, I think it goes deeper than that. A Buddhist priest, Yoshida Kenko, once wrote, "If man were never to fade away like the dews of Adashino, never to vanish like the smoke over Toribeyama, how things would lose their power to move us." Sorry, I almost inspired myself there. I got very in the moment. And don't worry, that is the last of the quotes in today's show. So here's the thing, I guess in a broader sense, Mono no Aware is all about appreciating the fleeting moments around us. Maybe seeing your child walk for the first time. Maybe watching the sunset. Maybe just hanging out with your friends. And knowing that the moment is not bound to last for too long. So take it in, and don't be too sad when it's over. This is Getting Emotional. That was Mono no Aware, and big thank you to Sonoko for chatting to me. Also thank you to you for listening. Please do rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, get emotional, and find me on Twitter @GetEmotionalPod. See you next time.